I just finished reading an arc of my most anticipated read of the year. I'm talking about The Thief and the Traitor Bride. So let's get into it. The story is set a couple of years after the events of the Second Death of Locke. Eleanor, the female main character, is a spy. She's been estranged from her husband Caspian for a number of years after a betrayal. All of a sudden, he's back in her life and she's forced to go on a journey with him to do some spying for her spy master and for Caspian to acquire a magical artifact. Of course, there's a lot of animosity between the two main characters to start with, but sparks fly and they fall back into their old patterns by the end. The plot is sort of meandering. The first half was difficult to get through, but in the second half, you arrive at the Isle of Locke and you're reintroduced to all of the characters of the Second Death of Locke, and it's very welcoming to read about them again. I think that's what makes The Thief and the Traitor Bride somewhat of a disappointment, in that the characters that I like most are the characters from the first book. And Eleanor and Caspian and the rest of the new characters introduced in this book aren't as interesting or likable. I feel like we never really get a good sense of who Caspian is as a character, and Eleanor can be frustrating. She is very stubborn, she's very arrogant, she hates to admit when she's wrong, her morals are questionable, her spine skills, I'm not sure how great they are, and she doesn't treat the people around her very well. What was really great about the Second Death of Locke was the epicness of the story and the yearning between the main characters and the chemistry in that relationship. Eleanor and Caspian just don't have that same level of yearning and chemistry. We're told Caspian has been yearning for Eleanor for years, and there are some great angsty moments in their story, but I just never felt that connection to the two of them. Maybe because we don't really get a good sense of who Caspian is as a character, and because Eleanor can be not the most relatable or likable female main character out there. I do like the representation in these books. It's a queer normative world. Most, if not all, of the characters are bisexual, trans, gay, or non binary. And Caspian is not white, which is really refreshing to see in a male main character when most of those in the fantasy romance genre are just really tan, bronze white guys. The Second Death of Locke was my second favorite book of last year, and I read a lot of books last year, so that's saying something. And that's why The Thief and the Traitor Bride is kind of a disappointment. I'm still really excited to read whatever comes next in this series. I think this world is really great, and I hope it is more like the Second Death of Locke than the sequel. Now, the books in these series are supposed to be treated as standalones. However, I do not think that is the case here. I think you absolutely have to read The Second Death of Locke first to understand what's going on in The Thief and the Traitor Bride. And even if you loved The Second Death of Locke, you might not understand everything that's going on in this story. There's a lot of name dropping, a lot of politics, different magic systems. It's confusing. I'm not sure it entirely makes sense at points, and that will probably throw a lot of people off, especially if you're not already familiar with the series. In short, go read The Second Death of Locke if you haven't read it yet. It's fantastic. And if you're going to go read The Thief and the Traitor Bride, just try and keep your expectations level. Don't get your hopes up too high. It's not quite the same experience. However, this is a great series.